Bye-bye!
Deltarune is full of tons of colorful characters, both dark and bright. Throughout our journey, we encounter many along the way, and as quickly as we meet them, we say our goodbyes as we move on. However, there is one character that was off the beaten path, a character that most players seemingly overlooked unless they chose to resist the path outlined before them. A troubled soul locked in a cage who starves from the loneliness of its enclosed world. This is the story of Jevil, the Joker of Deltarune. Sponsorships help out a ton, so I want to thank Displate for sponsoring this video. Displate produces some really slick, high-quality metal posters in collaboration with artists from around the world. They have amazing metal prints featuring plenty of your favorite video games, movies, and TV shows, alongside some other eye-catching artistic pieces. I received a Displate about a year ago as a gift from my brother, and I absolutely love the idea of it. So working together with them is really awesome. Every time you buy a Displate, they plant 10 trees as well, which I think is a really great concept. So if you want to support some talented artists and receive some one-of-a-kind, truly unique metal posters to spruce up your place, check out the link in the description below to see what great sales they have going on right now. And I want to thank Displate for supporting me as a creator. By now, we're used to characters that seem out of this world. From strange doctors scattered across time and space, to corrupted individuals who seek power, to those bound to forever sail the edge of reality. But when it comes to adding to the ranks of these characters, our Joker friend fits in very nicely alongside them. In fact, Jevil's story is one that ties Undertale and Deltarune directly together. And in this video, we're going to be talking about that fragile bridge between worlds. So first and foremost, we need to set the stage. Let's go over what we know about Jevil and his bizarre behaviors. When you're within Card Castle's elevator, Jevil's floor is marked with a series of question marks. It seems weird that someone would be locked away this far up in the castle, despite there being a full-fledged jail in the basement. However, given the type of character Jevil is, perhaps a special cell was needed. Why they chose this location though was a mystery. Upon exiting the elevator for the first time and proceeding down the long staircase, that's when we first hear Jevil cry out from the dark. Our characters stop in front of the dark cell, as they hear a series of boo-hoos cry out from the darkness. This is when Jevil shares his story of woe, and how he is truly innocent. He was locked up due to a game he played going over badly, but he proclaims that he's truly the clever one because despite being locked up, he's really the only one that is free. He claims that everyone else is imprisoned, and that they locked up their own race by building a prison around the whole world. Despite claiming he is free, his loneliness is eating him alive. Thus, he asks our characters if they wish to play a game in which they'll set him free. And this is where our quest to save Jevil begins. We're on the hunt for his key, and he tells us to visit a particular shopkeeper to inquire about it. When we head back to Sham, yes, that's apparently how you pronounce it. When we head back to Sham to ask about the key in Jevil, he is pretty surprised. He doesn't believe we're actually asking about him, but when he realizes it, he tells us that he was the one who locked him up. And apparently it was a lot of trouble. However, leaving Jevil alone by himself could be even more trouble, and he thinks that maybe it's a good idea that us, the heroes, deal with him now. After all, as Sham, the shopkeeper, puts it, it's not as if whatever happens will matter in the end, which is pretty cryptic. Sham then gives us a piece of the key and tells us where to find another part, almost as if he was the one who broke it and hid it there. Upon retrieving the key pieces, we take them to MacLeod, who then crafts them into the full key. However, while doing so, MacLeod tells us the key has a terrible energy coming from it. He says he only fixed the key in hopes that we never have to use it. But despite his warning, we go to use it. We go back to Card Castle, approach Jevil's door, and then our choice doesn't matter. If we choose to open the door, a smaller door appears and opens. But if we choose not to open the door, Jevil tells us we've come too far and our choice has run out. The door opens regardless, and we step inside to meet Jevil face to face. This is when we learn the game we signed up for isn't something fun at all. It's a game of life and death. As Jevil puts it, a simple numbers game. When your HP drops to 0, you lose, and thus our fight begins. But despite not having any choices for a majority of the game, we have the choice to attack Jevil or pacify him. While they lead to similar conclusions, the results are actually different. On one hand, if we spare Jevil, he bestows upon us the Jevil's Tail, which is armor. whereas we receive Devil's Knife if he's defeated through attacking. What's interesting though is that on one occasion, he tells us to take the Jevil's Tail with us, whereas he says take me when Devil's Knife is gifted to us, meaning he's transformed himself into a weapon. The weapon we've been seeing in this fight. Between his two different dialogue endings, he references that the knight's hand is drifting forward. He also states we won't be having pleasant dreams because a nightmare will awaken in our hearts. The last bit of provided information we have about Jevil is if we return to Sham and select his new dialogue options. When asked about Jevil specifically, he states the following. Jevil was a funny little man. Once the court jester, I the court magician. A friend? Could I consider him a friend? Perhaps not. But he was the only one who matched me in the games we used to play. One day he met a strange someone, and since then he began to change. He started saying bizarre things that didn't completely make sense, but they didn't completely not make sense either. Soon he began to see the world as a game, and everyone as its participants. As the court mage and his only companion, Sham was forced to lock him away, or rather lock us all away, in his own words. Since that time, the strange words he said have stuck inside my cotton, and my view of this world has become darker yet darker. Reflecting on those old memories, I think perhaps I miss playing games with him, and I wonder if I hadn't been asked to lock him up, would I have found a little more purpose in my life? When Sham is told you won against Jevil, he's surprised and says the following. You defeated him? You really defeated him. I see. Perhaps you three may truly be heroes after all. But Jevil was just a taste of what you'll face from now on. One day soon, you too will begin to realize the futility of your actions. At that time, feel free to come back here. I'll make you tea, and we can toast to the end of the world. And that's everything we're told in the game. But this is where things get interesting. Because now that the stage is set, it's time to talk about why Jevil is our bridge to Undertale. Okay, so first things first, we have to talk about what is Delta Rune in regards to what it actually represents. This will tie into Jevil in just a bit. Judging by the conclusion of the game, it's apparent everything we just experienced within the game drew influence from what surrounds us. The game pieces, the cards, the stuffed animal that looks a lot like Sham. One would immediately think Deltarune's Dark World doesn't exist. It was merely Chris opening up to Susie and playing a game similar to Dungeons & Dragons with them. A game within a game, so to speak. This was Chris's domain, where they could be whatever they wanted to be. A brave, commanding warrior that was different than how they were in real life. A quiet kid that others often judged as being slightly creepy. And it's easy to take in that narrative, and doing so makes the ending seem pretty abrupt. Was everything we experienced not real? Was it truly just a game? Do we miss our brother enough to create him within our world? One would think that's probably the most logical theory, but it doesn't entirely have to be true. The direct message of the game changes depending on how we view this, and while those motives certainly make the most sense for the character plots, the Dark World does exist. And there's a couple different instances that prove it. First and foremost, our characters' reactions. Upon exiting the world, Susie has no idea what just happened. The lights were off and now they're on, and the room is a mess. They entered the closet initially, but ended up in the classroom beside it. If we spent the entire day simply playing games in the classroom, it wouldn't make sense for her to question these things. They'd be filled with joy rather than confusion, because they just had an awesome gaming session. Of course, Susie recognizes this after leaving and definitely wants to go back to the Dark World. And two, there is one specific item that remains in our inventory upon leaving the Dark World, something I mentioned in my second video. While it's apparent that our weapons and items directly translate to school objects, the egg we can receive from the mysterious man remains, and if we add it to Asgore's refrigerator, it can multiply. This is strange because if it was something we gained within the Dark World, why does it remain unchanged, unlike all the other items after we leave? Obviously, Temmie had an egg in the classroom, but we never went back into the classroom to take it. The fact that this multiplies is very similar to the dog residue from Undertale 2. An item seemingly duplicating for no reason. But what does all this have to do with Jevil? How does this influence things? With the Dark World being born from imagination based on our surroundings, it spawns another repeating timeline similar to Undertale. A game within a game, but still under the rules of the original. A lot of people assume the one Jevil talked to was the knight himself, and upon doing so, this corrupted Jevil's thoughts. But the thing is, this doesn't make sense. The knight has had plenty of influence among other characters in this realm, and other characters like the king have surely spoken to him, especially if he was put in charge by the knight. If this broke Jevil, it would have broken others too. In addition to this, when Shaw mentions the knight, his name pops up in red. But when he talks about the strange someone that Jevil spoke to, it isn't red. So Jevil's insanity has to be drawn from elsewhere. A figure we've never actually fully met, but we know he exists. I believe that Jevil interacted with W.D. Gaster. Now hold on, before popping down to the comments, let me explain why. Everything about Jevil's demeanor and the story surrounding him matches up. First and foremost, his theme, the World Revolving, references both the carousel we see during our fight, but also the idea of a game starting over. You play to the end, and you start over at the beginning, a cycle that mirrors what we know about the timelines in Undertale. But beyond that, the backstory from Sham surely dances around the topic of Gaster. When Sham talks about Jevil and the way he spoke to him, he said the words were something he couldn't forget. He himself began to change, and his world became darker yet darker. Now that phrase obviously is going to spark a memory with many of us. If we rewind back to the hidden version of the 17th lab entry from Undertale, the one written in Wingdings, we hear the same phrase, dark, darker yet darker. The darkness keeps growing, the shadows cutting deeper. Photon readings negative. The next experiment seems very, very interesting. What do you two think? We know those who follow Gaster question their own existence by how Goner Kid reacts. Anyone who has ever had direct contact with Gaster, following his accident, seems to lose themselves. If Jevil were to truly be going insane, and speak about things from a game perspective, that means he knows what Gaster knows. He can see the world for what it is, a game world. He knows we have HP, similar to how Kara identified that same stat. But the reason why Jevil is insane and Sham is not is because he heard it directly from Gaster himself. Having someone show you the secrets of the world versus someone merely telling you about them are two different things. It's why some people argue that ghosts and UFOs exist, while others won't believe it unless they experience it themselves. But it goes even deeper. During Jevil's fight, we have the rare chance of encountering Everyman, who was a character that would appear in Reaper Bird's attacks in Undertale. Reaper Bird and Everyman were amalgamates created in the True Lab, the lab that Gaster once resided in. They were the results of Alphys's continued research on determination through experimentation, research that Gaster started but never finished. Everyman makes another appearance in the alleyway too, where we find Alphys and Delta Rune. So its existence is surely mirrored in this world, but for Jevil to manifest this image into his attacks, it only adds another point of evidence to the idea that Gaster was the one who broke Jevil's mind. We know traces of Gaster exist in this game by his iconic noises being sprinkled about, from phone calls within the Dark World, to the underground dwelling located south of town. And the story of Jevil only ties Deltarune to Undertale's behind-the-scenes events even more. The aspects of the story that were outside the realm of the story itself. Jevil proves that the experiments of Gaster have affected this world, even this subworld. A world created by the act of people playing with toys and game pieces. But it's something much more than that. It's not just in their heads. Somehow it is reality. But what does all that really amount to? What is the Dark World really? Why is the Knight's Hand moving a bad omen? And what do all the aspects of it really mean for Deltarune and even Undertale? Well, next time I'll be covering just that. We're going to analyze the Dark World from top to bottom, to dissect the mysteries, metaphors, and everything in between, to show how what started as a simple game in a classroom birthed a world that fights for existence. But in the meantime, let me know what you think about Jevil's role in the story. Beyond the Joker card in a deck, how do they tie into the plots in your eyes? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And with that, thanks for tuning in to this revolving world of madness. I highly recommend checking out my video on Deltarune's king and why he isn't the true villain. And we're not talking about the knight either. Anyways, thanks for watching guys and gals, and until my next video, cheers.